Joshua Schweitzer asked, given the atrocity that overshadows the film, have I seen The Dark Knight Rises, and can I comment on its blatantly anti-socialist, anti-Occupy Wall Street messaging? Yes, I can, and yes, I will. I will do this without spoilers. I know there's some people who haven't seen it. When the lights came up in that movie, the first thing I said, I saw it with Jeremy and a couple of other friends, and I said, that is the most conservative film that's ever been made in human history. That is, I don't know what the budget was, let's say it's $300 million. That is a $300 million blow for freedom and liberty, the likes of which I've never seen. It's a great movie. There's so much to talk about with the movie. You know what? I'd like to concentrate just on the movie and not so much on the shooting. We'll come back and maybe get to that later because there's a lot to be said about that. But let's just talk about the movie today. I just finished recording a Clavin Whittle show at PJTV, which is my favorite commentary. I love doing that show. Nobody ever gets to watch it. You have to be a PJTV member, and you know it's terrific stuff. It's hidden. Nobody gets to see it. But I had the lights come up after Dark Knight Rises, and I said, that is the most conservative film that's ever been made. And Andrew Clavin, as it turns out, said the precise exact same thing. Yes, Brandon, far more conservative than the Avengers. The reason that The Dark Knight Rises is the most conservative movie ever made is not because it preaches conservative values. And this is entirely what we're trying to do with Aurora and with Arroyo, Jeremy's movie, which is about to be released. He's just about done with it. The reason it's such a great conservative message is not because it preaches conservative values. The Dark Knight Rises, I think this is obvious from the trailer, so again, I'm going to try very hard to be avoiding spoilers here, but The Dark Knight Rises, in a nutshell, is what happens if Occupy Wall Street people get their way. It shows you, with $300 million worth of production values, what will happen to America if Barack Obama and his anti-prosperity policies and his class warfare actually comes to fruition. This movie is about Occupy Wall Street. This movie is about law and order, and it's about a billionaire and his resources, using those resources for good, versus the nihilism, the socialism, and the mob rule of Occupy Wall Street. You have to see this movie. You have to see it. It's so good on so many levels. It's stunning. It's shocking. I can't believe the film got released. A lot of people said that the previous Dark Knight movie, The Dark Knight, was actually a very conservative movie, and it was. And many people made the connection between Bruce Wayne as Batman and George W. Bush, because at the end of the second movie, the previous movie, the man who has gotten dirty, who's gotten his hands dirty defending civilization, is vilified for it. And the people who are actually the villains get the credit. And basically at the end of the second movie, Commissioner Gordon says essentially, you're going to be hated and despised for doing the right thing. And Batman says, okay, I'll take that deal. Many people drew that connection with Bush. But this movie is in a league all its own. This movie shows in horrifying realism what the end result of this class warfare in Occupy Wall Street looks like. There are people being pulled out of their homes. There are look, it's the French Revolution. If you want to know what the French Revolution in America in 2012 looks like, go see Dark Knight Rises. There are kangaroo courts and show trials. The wealthy are pulled out of their houses, kicking and screaming. They're murdered in cold blood. All of their property is redistributed to the poor. And the point I made with Andrew Clavin earlier today was simply this: the real genius of showing what happens here is it gets to the big lie of socialism. Many people think that the big lie of socialism is that these people believe that spreading the wealth means that, you know, that it's going to all be great and everybody's going to be equal and everybody's going to be happy and everybody's going to be equally prosperous. But the super untold lie of socialism is that the people who want to bring socialism never actually live under socialism. What I mean by that is, when Lenin and Trotsky and all those other guys started the Russian Revolution, they didn't organize the Russian Revolution, have the revolution, set up the workers' paradise, and then go back to work in coal mines, did they? No, they lived like princes in the palaces. They lived in the Kremlin. They lived in the Winter Palace. They had their little dachas. All the way through the Soviet Union, the people that talked the loudest about equality and so on lived like kings. Everybody else has to live in equal squalor, but not them. And in Dark Knight Rises, Bane, the villain, basically stands on the steps of a marble building with the marble columns in the background, and he tells these people exactly what they want to hear. He gives them the giant liberal story, right? He basically says it to them. He says, the time has come for you to end this oppression of the rich who've made their millions off the sweat of your brow. Bain basically gives the exact speech that you've been hearing from people like Barack Obama. It's the most powerful moment, I think, in the movie for me. What happens is this guy gets out on the steps of a marble building and he basically tells the great liberal lie. The rich people have taken all of your hard work and stolen it for themselves. And he says, no one will interfere. We're giving Gotham back to the people. You shall have your spoils, and you shall have your courts. And he tells them everything that Barack Obama has been telling them. And the mob takes over. And one of the many, many messages that you get from Dark Knight Rises is, if you give luxury to the mob does not live in luxury. The mob destroys luxury. They loot all of the houses. They deface the paintings. They smash the china. This happens again and 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 again. The only thing that you accomplish by destroying the successful people is now everyone lives in worse squalor than before, because now there's anarchy. Now no one's writing the paychecks. Now it's people sitting around, burning tires, roasting rats on a spit. It's not like if you give wealth to the mob and everybody in the mob suddenly lives like wealthy people. It's a decision they make. They loot and trash and destroy everything. They destroy everything. It's not that they're poor. It's not the people. It's not the poor people. You have to be very careful about this, because what happens when you give luxury to the mob in terms of a revolution, when the mob storms the palace at Versailles, or the mob storms the Winter Palace in Russia, or if the mob storms Park Avenue in The Dark Knight Rises, the reason that the wealth and the luxury is destroyed is because it is not owned by them and it was not generated by them. They did not produce it. They don't own it. They don't have any sense of ownership. Of course they destroy it. It's lifestyle choices. It's how they were raised. It's not racism. It's not even intellect. It's just a simple set of values that was never installed in them. And so take my car, for example. Last Stratosphere Lounge, I talked about my new Camaro. I love it more than anything. I give myself 10 minutes extra time before work and after work, not because it takes me longer. It takes me a lot quicker to go to work in my Camaro than it did in my Ford Escort. But because I go out to the car and I just stand there and look at it. I've had it for almost 2 weeks now. I've had it 2 weeks exactly today. And I stand there and look at it. And I can't believe that I own this car. And I sit inside it and I don't start the engine. I just look around and said, look what your hard work has gotten you. Look at this. This is the result. This is the reward for all of those times going back 25 or 30 years when I would be working on stuff, when all my friends are out partying, I'm staying home working on things, or I'm working on computer graphics, or I'm working on movie scripts. Everyone else having a good time. I'm out here just working. Of course, I didn't actually build that. Somebody else built that. But it's a reward, right? If my Camaro, the car that I just bought, that, by the way, I've washed my car more times in 2 weeks than I washed the previous car in 2 years. But it's because I love it, because it's mine. Now, if I had to give that car up every night and I got to drive the exact same car every 20th day and everybody else got to drive my car every 20th day, I would come back to the car and 5 out of the 20 people would take good care of the car, but 15 wouldn't. And when I'd get back into the car again the next time, it'd be all scuffed and marked and dinged and everything. And it wouldn't be mine anymore. And I'd say, well, it's already dinged and obviously nobody else gives a damn about it. And I'm tired of vacuuming out the Cheetos from the back seat. Right? And so the car would just get worse and worse and worse. And everything would come down to the bottom level. It would come down to the level of public everything. P.J. O'Rourke, the man who made me a conservative, man who really put me over into this camp, made me really think about things. P.J. O'Rourke said, if you take any noun, any object, and then you add the word public to the front of it, watch how it degrades the value of that object. Transportation, public transportation. Swimming pool, public swimming pool. Housing, public housing. It is the destruction of all of the pride and all of the care that makes things nice. Makes things nice. I'm going to tell you a story I don't often tell, because you know how the left quotes things out of context. This is not me speaking. This is a woman speaking. When I was a limo driver, I got here in 1988 and drove a limo in LA from 1988 to about 1991, 92, something like that. And I drove business people from San Marino, which is a real Tony neighborhood out by Pasadena, to and from the airport. I drove executives in a town car. That's all I did. So I would get to talk to top people, and I learned a lot from those people. One day I was driving a woman. She was sitting in the back. She didn't say a word. Good limo driver knows when to talk, and a good limo driver knows when to shut up. And she didn't want to talk. And we were driving through just the north part of South Central. Just south of the 10 is a road called Exposition, and it's a great way to move east and west. Nobody knows about it. It's the way to travel. It takes you through some fairly dicey parts of town. Nothing terribly bad, but it's not the best neighborhood. Now, I don't know whether this woman was a racist or not, because it's not a racist argument. Certainly she could be interpreted as being racist, but it's not a racist argument. And that's why I'm going to repeat it to you. She didn't say a word, and we were driving through these terrible, nasty neighborhoods. I picked her up in San Marino, which is a very nice neighborhood. And as we're driving through this neighborhood, she had the whole time, she just had her head up against the glass. She was very worried, obviously deep in thought about something. And she said one sentence, and she said, you know, not even to me really, I think she was just thinking aloud. She said, you know, if you took all of these people and moved them to San Marino, and took all of the people in San Marino and moved them here, in 6 months, this place would look like San Marino, and San Marino would look like this place. And I thought, my God, that's precisely correct. Now, needless to say, the left will come screeching out of the closet with how this is all about racism, but you see, the point of it is, it's not about race at all. It has nothing to do with race. It's the opposite of race. She didn't say black people. She said, these people. Oh, it's code. No, it's not code. What it means is this. It means that I firmly believe that the human animal is essentially interchangeable. When you have Supreme Court justices and astronauts who are black, and you have the lowest form of dirtbags in the world that are white, it's fairly obvious to me it's the programming, it's not the machine. What it means is it means that the people who live in San Marino are successful because of choices they make. They're successful because of lifestyle choices that they make. People say, oh, it's their connections. It's got nothing to do with connections. I had no connections. My dad was a middle-class guy. My dad never made more than $44,000 a year, which was shocking to me. He was a hotel manager. He had some nice perks, but I was blown away by that when he told me that. I got no inheritance. And just so we're clear on this, when I had failed in any number of businesses, the one I'd failed in most recently prior to the work I started doing as a TV editor, I was the only guy in a computer graphics company. And I wrote and directed and did my own CG stuff, and I was a terrible businessman. I was not a bad CG artist. And things got so bad that my Uncle Ted decided to throw the circuit breakers on me, and in 1997 he pulled me out of Los Angeles, flew me to Australia for 3 months just to get my head together. God bless him. So I was down in Australia, and I was far, far away from everything, and the first month was great, and the second month I got homesick, and the third month I had to get back. So when I got off the plane in 1997 or 98, I guess it was, I had sold my car, I had no apartment, I had $40 in cash, and that's all I had. I had $40 in cash. My friends took me in and put me up in his garage, and then my friend's wife, because I was still in shell shock, saw an ad for an editing position in Orange County, which was a long way down. I don't know. She said, no, I've already booked you. You need to go down. So I went down. I didn't sit there. I didn't take welfare. I went to the interview even though I was feeling like hell. Something about my interview, for some reason or another, convinced the guy who was hiring me to advance me my first week's pay. I had no car. I had no apartment. So what we did was I sold a couple of things that I'd had, and I bought a bicycle for $35. And I took the rest of that advance, and I stayed in a bad motel. I stayed in a really, really cheap bad motel that was bike distance to this thing. And I did have another client who wanted me to do some video work for a sports team. I'd done some work for him for the Gators before I'd had this massive failure. So I got off the plane from Australia with $40 in cash. My friend got me the job. I went down, I lived in a motel, and I got in there at 5 in the morning, and I worked on this other job on the editing machine from 5 until about 8:30 or 9. Then from 9 to 6:30 I worked the job they were paying me for. And then I had nothing to go home to. And then I stayed from 6:30 until 10 or 11 o'clock at night and did some more work on this other stuff. And I lived in that motel for about 4.5, 5 weeks. Rode the bike to and from every day. Nearly got mugged one night on the bike going home, and somebody just started running after me. And if I hadn't been in bicycle shape, they probably would have caught me, but they didn't. After I got the money from the extra job, I used that money to get an apartment. And I went in for to go to a place that seemed decent, and they ran my credit score, and they said, we don't think we've ever seen anything below a 350. These are just the facts. So I had to go through the embarrassment of having me be turned down 3 or 4 places, finally found a place that would take me for it, and I had to pay them 2-3 months extra rent, which I just barely had. And then I would ride my bicycle from work to home and back, and that was quite a ride. And after I'd done that for about 6 months, I was able to afford a used Honda CRX, which I got, and so on and so on. So look, this is not to tell you what a swell guy I am. This is the kind of story you hear about all the time in America. And the reason I'm telling you this story is because I take care of my Camaro because I earned my Camaro, and I worked hard for it. And my friend Dana and I bought an airplane. She bought an airplane. She bought an airplane for me together. She bought it, and I paid it back. I paid back half of it. We wanted it, and she'd saved and had the discipline that I didn't have, and so now I have an airplane and a car. And these things mean the world to me, and I take very good care of them, but I take very good care of them, and this is the point of this entire long circular rant. I take good care of them because I worked very hard for them. Nobody gave me the plane, and nobody said you have to share the plane, and nobody gave me a car and said you have to share the car. They're mine. I worked for them. I worked very, 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 very hard. And I know you do the same thing, which is why this whole Obama thing about, oh, you didn't build that business, that's why it's so offensive to people. It may have cost him the campaign. I hope it did. You know, Romney had the quote, the best quote I think I've ever heard. Oh, it was taken out of context. And Romney said, the context is worse than the quote. I know we're kind of running around in all different areas here. But look, the point I'm trying to make is this. Go see The Dark Knight Rises, because The Dark Knight Rises shows you what happens when socialism comes to America. And Catwoman in the beginning, and this is in the trailer, Catwoman in the beginning wants this. She wants this. She's tired of the rich having everything and her having nothing. And so she gets what she wants. She gets this big revolution of the mob. And she realizes what a god-awful, horrible mistake this whole thing is. It is the most conservative movie ever made. I cannot recommend it highly enough. Plus, it's just an excellent movie. Fair amount of violence in there, so be careful with your kids and stuff.